In this video, I'm going to show you this, my prototype electronic foot drum kit. Now I've split this down into 4 sections. First, I'm going to talk about the actual pedals themselves and the mechanics of it. Then I'm going to talk about the springs and the spring tension and how I've set all that up. Then I'm going to talk about the core of this, which is the piezoelectric sensors. That's what creates the signal that turns into drums. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about the drum module that I've chosen and why I chose that. Now, in terms of how I've laid out the pedals, I've essentially copied a Farmer foot drum kit, pedals for percussion and a pedal for kick, and then 2 for the snare. What I really like about this and what I really like about the Farmer foot drum kit is the way that you can do the snare with either heel. Now that gives you a few more options, not just for how you structure your drum beats, but it also allows you to do flam hits on the snare, which I think is incredibly cool. Now earlier on, I showed you a video of Cam Cohen. Have another look at this again. Do you see how he's hitting both heels together to create that really kind of flammy snare drum sound? So I wanted to be able to do that on my own electronic foot drum kit, which is why I've got these 2 beams that are both wired up into the snare input, and that allows me to kind of flam back off these 2 snares. This is a kick pedal from a drum kit. Now, if you haven't seen these before, it's fairly simple. The way it works is you push your foot down on the plate here, and the spring on the side goes under tension. So as you're pushing down, there's more and more tension until you strike the drum head. Then the beater will bounce back off the drum head and the pedal will come flying back up, but the spring will kind of return it to its initial position. Now, I spent a long time trying to work out how I was going to replicate this kind of action. I came to the realization that the motion when you're playing a kick pedal on a real drum kit is actually incredibly different to the stamping motion when you're playing guitar. So I decided after a lot of deliberation that I wasn't going to try and replicate what a real kick pedal is like. And I was going to go for something that was more geared towards just stomping and leaving your foot, which is why I went for essentially a piece of wood and a door hinge with a spring underneath it. Now, because this is a prototype, I didn't want to spend much money. I wasn't sure what this would be like to play, so I didn't push the boat out. I bought this from our local hardware store. This whole thing cost me about 20 quid to put together because I wasn't sure if it would work, but it actually works surprisingly well. So for the springs on these pedals, I went onto the internet and I bought a bunch of different springs for different tensions. It's very difficult to know just by looking at the dimensions of a spring what it's going to feel like under your foot. So I wasn't too bothered about thicknesses or lengths or diameters or number of coils. I just bought a bunch of different springs and tried them all out. They range from relatively easy to compress like this to this one I can't even touch. I'm not sure what the hell I'm going to do with this. That's way too thick. And then this one as well, which I'll come on to in a bit. So after trying out a bunch of different spring tensions under my foot, I went for this, which I think is a 1.6 millimeter carbon steel, about 2 centimeters diameter with a bunch of coils in it. Now, when I bought this, it was cut off a longer spring, so I had to melt the edges with a blowtorch and clamp them down again, but it works quite well. And I can experiment with placing these at different positions along the pedal for different feel. The further along this side it is, this is the lever effect essentially, this is proper physics. The further along this side it is, the harder you have to push down on it, but the less travel there is. Whereas if I move it to the back, I don't have to push as hard, but there's much more travel, and that's not necessarily a good thing. So next we come on to this. This is a piezoelectric sensor, and this is what turns the striking motion into a signal that the drum module can interpret and play a sample from its brain. So I've taken one of these and put a jack onto the end of it, plugged it into my sound card, and you can see as I tap it, the waveform appearing. And this is what the drum module will use to work out where to play the sample. Now, a common problem with using these to make electronic drum kits is that if you have multiple electronic sensors on a board and you hit one, the vibrations from that hit will go through the board and it could possibly trigger other drums around. Now, this is a very common problem that happens on real electronic drum kits too. It's called crosstalk. And my idea to get around that was to mount the sensors on the actual pedals themselves. That way, once you've struck the pedal, it will release itself. And if you want to have vibrations going between 2 sensors, they would have to go all the way along the pedal, through the hinges, across the board, through the other hinges and into other sensors. Now, I'm not saying that's not going to happen, but I'm hoping that will reduce the amount of vibrations that go through the drum kit and trigger other drums. And that actually works surprisingly well. I don't get very much crosstalk at all with this drum kit. The main problem I have with drums triggering when they shouldn't do is because of my feet. If I stamp down with one foot, the other foot might be sort of resting on a sensor and it can move, and that can trigger another drum. So that's actually more of a problem than the sensors themselves. So this works quite well. What I've done here is they're striking. I bought a small, I think this is a landing mount from a drone or something, but I've got a small rubber pad. The piezoelectric sensor, which I've encased in 2 pieces of neoprene rubber, hits that, and that creates a striking, and that creates this waveform that the drum brain will pick up. Which brings us lastly onto this. This is the drum module. This is the brain. Now, I've had a couple of actual electronic drum kits over the years, and I really, really like Roland electronic drum kits. I honestly think they are the kind of gold standard for your sort of budget, entry-level, sub-1,000-pound drum kits. Roland are excellent. So I knew I wanted to get a Roland module, and I had a look on eBay to see what I could buy secondhand, and I came across this. This is a Roland TD4, and it has a very, very useful feature that I like about it, which is this 24-pin, I think, DIN plug at the back. Now, the way these work is there's an adapter which will turn this DIN plug into multiple mono plugs, which will go into your sensors. If this was to be used on an actual electronic drum kit, this would be a design flaw because this is a single point of failure. And I wouldn't like this if it was going onto a real drum kit because only one of these could break and the whole thing breaks. But for my use case, this is absolutely perfect because it means I can wire my very thin wires all into one plug and then plug them into the back of this and not have to have loads of 1/4-inch jacks all over the place. So yeah, I'm super happy with my drum module. I really, really like this. This is a Roland TD4 percussion sound module. I really, really like this. It's also got a couple of screw mounts on the back so that I can mount this onto my board and I'm away. The last thing I did right at the end was I talked before about all the little springs I bought like this. One of the springs I bought was way, way, way too strong to be used as a foot pedal, but it's perfect for adding a little bit of suspension underneath my foot drum kit. And this means I can put this on the floor upstairs on my floorboards and stamp away on it, and it doesn't really shake the house to pieces. So this is a more kind of, this is more of a household friendly improvement other than actually helping the drum kit work in any way. But yeah, so that's my prototype. Here's another video of me playing it, and join me again when I iterate on this.